I, a 34-year-old female, have been with my husband, 37-year-old male, we'll call him Nathan, for 8 years. Ever since our daughter, 3-year-old female, was born, I have been unable to trust Nathan with anything, no matter how small. Background context. When I was 19, a semi-truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and my car was turned into scrap metal with me inside it. I have enough metal holding me together that I light up like a Christmas tree for Transportation Security Administration, and I am physically impaired with good and bad days. I used a portion of my settlement check to buy a house outright and have it retrofitted to accommodate my future wheelchair needs. I work in software development because it's fun, and nobody cares if I work from bed on bad days. My husband has not worked in 5 years. It was fine until our daughter was born. Between the settlement money, a paid-off house, and my salary, I enjoyed having him here with me. He contributed by handling most of the household chores. We also hired a weekly cleaner with monthly deep cleaning because it gave us more time together. Ever since our daughter was born, it was like a light switch turned off in his head. For our daughter, he would buy the wrong size diapers. He would not fully mix bottles. He would put diapers on backwards. He would leave out wipes covered in poop. This past week, he went to the store 3 times because he kept coming home with the wrong size socks and shoes for her. I eventually just ordered the right ones on Amazon. For me, he has tried to help me with filling up my weekly pill organizer, but several times he spilled the new medications all over the floor. Then he would not see that he didn't pick them all up. He has repeatedly brought me grapefruit juice to take my medications with, which is not allowed. He has repeatedly forgotten that I can't have dairy and puts milk in my coffee or cheese on a burger. He has broken many of my things due to carelessness. He shattered my laptop because it slipped out of his hand when he tried to pack it for a trip, even after I told him I would pack my own electronics. We've lost many spoons and forks to the garbage disposal. He tried to replace the head gasket in my car and over-torqued the engine bolt, which shattered inside the engine block. 2 different shops said they couldn't repair it. We ended up getting a new vehicle because a replacement engine would have cost $11,000. A week later, he crashed the new car into the garage door because he thought he pressed the brakes, but actually accelerated. He wanted to pursue TikToks and streaming as a hobby. I supported him initially, but I quickly noticed a pattern. He was sloppy and careless when it came to anything involving our daughter or me. He would build entire sets for streaming or making videos, and then completely forget about important things outside of his hobby. It all came to a head 4 nights ago. He streamed himself building a new set piece for 9 straight hours. Meanwhile, I clocked out early to pick up our daughter from summer camp, cooked and fed both of us, and got her ready for bed. He came out to help put her to bed. I informed him that I needed to get some work done and would be in my office. I also asked him to take out the trash. He said he would. 2 hours later, I left my office and noticed the house felt warm. He had taken out the trash but left the front door partially open. He was back in the garage with loud game volume. I panicked because our daughter could have easily walked out of the house without him noticing. Thankfully, she was sound asleep. Then I realized that a stovetop burner was on, with a small pot on it and nothing inside. I didn't use the stove for cooking that night. I went into the garage and said, "Hey, I need you for a minute." I told him about the door situation and he responded, "I thought I locked it." We checked the camera and it showed that he didn't. I asked him about the burner being on and he said he was planning to make ramen but forgot. He pulled the still hot pot off the burner and put it straight into the sink, on top of our daughter's favorite plastic plate, which is now ruined. I'll admit I overreacted and screamed, "What are you doing?" He realized what he had done and pulled the pot off of our daughter's plate, but ended up dropping it onto the countertop. I quickly grabbed it and ran it under water to cool it down. I told him that I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't deal with him. I said I was taking my medications and going to bed. He grabbed a cup from the cupboard and set it straight onto the burner that had been on. I reached my limit and started crying. He kept saying that it was fine, things happen, it's just an accident. He had a rough day from streaming. He's just tired. He asked why I was crying over just a cup. He said we could replace it. My anger took over and I said it's because I have a liability and not a partner. He replied, "What the frick does that mean?" I screamed that I can't trust him to do anything and that I always have to watch him like a child. I always have to bear the costs of his mistakes. I said that every time I let my guard down and try to trust him to be an adult, I end up getting screwed over. I then said, "I can't see you as a partner anymore. You're just another liability in my checkbook." He immediately stormed out of the kitchen and went to bed. I called my mom and told her what happened. She thinks it's just stress and offered to take our daughter for a week so we can figure this out without her seeing it. She says it was a jerk thing to call my husband a liability. In the morning, I told my husband that my mom would pick up our daughter from summer camp and offered to watch her for a week. He said, okay. And that's been the only interaction we've had since. He spends all day in the garage playing games with his friends, making TikToks and streaming. For food, he's been ordering DoorDash and having the delivery person bring it to the garage. It's been days and he refuses to be in the same room as me. I've tried messaging him to ask if we can talk and find a solution, but he has left me on read. When I go into the garage, he ignores me but apologizes to his friends or viewers for the interruption and only unmutes his microphone when the noise stops. Before this blow up, I asked him if something was going on. I tried to respond gently every time he made a mistake, so our daughter wouldn't associate mistake with anger. I suggested he schedule a doctor's appointment to see if something was wrong medically. He always said I was overreacting and that people make mistakes. He didn't see an issue, even when the same mistakes kept happening. When I tried to make him understand that it was concerning how expensive his mistakes were becoming, he waved it off, saying, "It's not like we can't afford it." I love him dearly. I just miss the person he was before we had a child. I miss the person I could trust and rely on. Did I screw this up forever? Was I too harsh on his mistakes? Am I missing something? Am I the jerk? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Did I screw this up forever? Maybe, but do you actually want it? I can sympathize. A girl I dated for years had her shoot together in some ways, but in others she was a total screw-up. I couldn't really trust her with tasks, and what made things particularly bad is that her attitude to messing things up was poor, and I had no reason to think she would do better in future after she'd made another mistake. When I broke up with her, it was a big stress taken off my shoulders, which is not how it's supposed to work. A partner is supposed to make life easier, take half the workload, but an incompetent partner is more like a toddler that needs babysitting. I didn't have kids with her, so it was easy to walk away. It's hard to know the right move in your situation. Edit. She got a hire car once. Instead of putting it into drive, she put it into Tiptronic mode accidentally, and she drove for an hour on the freeway with the engine screaming at near max revs. She knew something was wrong, but kept driving. I asked her why she didn't call me, and it was because she was too prideful. I'm a car guy. I knew exactly what was wrong the moment the story started. She knew I would be able to help her, but she preferred to risk destroying the car. I wouldn't have found out about it if she didn't ask her dad about it. He told me. Comment 2. Girl, I will be blunt. He is waiting you out. You know you have a time limit on your mobility and disability. So does he. Once you reach it, he will get worse, as you will feel like no one will love you like that, and will fall for the sunk cost fallacy, allowing him to continue his mooching ways, but worse. Time for him to get a real job. Speak to a lawyer about trying to secure your assets so he can't take them in the event of a divorce. I'm in favor of, by the way. You will feel a weight lifted off of your shoulders. Who is paying for the DoorDash? You. You are his sugar mama. Do you want him in control of your medical decisions? Do you trust him with your future medical needs? Do you trust him to care for your daughter when you can't? To be honest, it sounds like he is deliberately trying to make you sick. Once your disability worsens, his behavior will worsen and most likely turn hurtful. He is already displaying early signs by icing you out and making you feel bad for his poor behavior. You are getting in the way of his games. He will rectify that. The answer is no. You can't. Lawyer up and separate. Not the idiot. Now for the update, thank you for reading my last post. This past week has been pretty up and down of emotions and events. After my mom picked up our daughter, I thought Nathan and I would have the space to talk things through. Instead, the silence between us grew louder. I tried to initiate conversations, but he either ignored me or gave me one-word answers. It was like living with a stranger. On the third day, I decided to take a more direct approach. I went into the garage and turned off his computer midstream. He was furious, but I told him we needed to talk. He reluctantly agreed, and we sat down in the living room. I asked him what was going on, why he seemed so disconnected and careless. He finally opened up and said he felt overwhelmed and useless. He admitted that he felt like he was failing as a husband and father, and that his hobbies were the only things that made him feel competent. I felt a pang of guilt. Maybe I had been too harsh, too focused on his mistakes, and not enough on his feelings. I suggested we see a therapist together to help us navigate this rough patch. He agreed, but I could see the reluctance in his eyes. The next day, I scheduled an appointment with a therapist who specializes in couples counseling. We had our first session via video call. The therapist asked us to share our feelings and concerns. Nathan admitted that he felt like he was constantly under a microscope, that every mistake he made was magnified. I shared my fears about our daughter's safety and my frustration with his carelessness. The therapist suggested we work on communication and set small, achievable goals for Nathan to rebuild his confidence. She also recommended that Nathan see a doctor to rule out any medical issues that might be affecting his behavior. Nathan agreed, albeit reluctantly. The following day, Nathan had his doctor's appointment. The doctor ran some tests and found that Nathan had a vitamin deficiency and was also experiencing symptoms of depression. The doctor prescribed supplements and suggested therapy for his mental health. Nathan seemed more hopeful after the appointment, and I felt a glimmer of hope too. We started working on the small goals the therapist suggested. Nathan took on simple tasks like making breakfast or doing the laundry. I made a conscious effort to praise him for his efforts, no matter how small. Things seemed to be improving, albeit slowly. But then, on the 6th day, disaster struck. Nathan was supposed to pick up a prescription for me. I reminded him multiple times and even wrote it down for him. He assured me he would get it. Hours passed and he didn't come back. I called him, but he didn't answer. Panic set in. I called the pharmacy and they said he never showed up. I finally got a call from Nathan. He sounded disoriented and said he had been in a minor car accident. My heart sank. I asked if he was okay and he said he was fine, just a bit shaken. I asked where he was and he gave me the location. I called a cab and rushed to the scene. When I arrived, I saw our car with a dented front bumper and Nathan sitting on the curb looking defeated. He told me he had been distracted and rear-ended the car in front of him. The police were there and they gave him a ticket for distracted driving. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. This was yet another costly mistake. We got home and I couldn't hold back my frustration. I asked him how he could be so careless, especially after everything we had been through. He broke down and said he felt like he couldn't do anything right, that he was a burden. I felt my heart break for him, but I also felt the weight of our situation pressing down on me. The next day, I called my mom and asked if she could keep our daughter for a bit longer. She agreed, sensing the urgency in my voice. I knew we needed more time to figure things out, but I was starting to lose hope. Nathan and I continued our therapy sessions, but the progress was slow. He was still making mistakes, and I was still struggling to trust him. The therapist suggested we take a break from each other to give us both some space to reflect and heal. I reluctantly agreed. Nathan moved in with his brother for a while, and I stayed at home. The silence was deafening, but it gave me time to think. I realized that I had been holding on to the hope that Nathan would change overnight, that things would go back to the way they were. But I knew deep down that it wasn't that simple. I started to focus on myself, on my own healing. I reached out to friends and family for support, and I started seeing a therapist on my own. I knew I needed to be strong for my daughter and for myself. Nathan and I are still in contact, but things are uncertain. We're both working on ourselves, trying to figure out if we can rebuild our relationship. It's a long road ahead, and I don't know what the future holds. But for now, I'm taking it one day at a time. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for threatening divorce after my husband turned into a lazy freeloader? I'm at my wit's end. Everything changed after marriage, and I couldn't tell you why. Our biggest problem is cleaning. My husband used to clean up after himself, but after marriage, he just completely stopped with no warning. We were dating for 3 years, engaged for 1, and now freshly married. We're 28 and 29. After we got married, my husband stopped cleaning. He wouldn't pick up after himself, wouldn't do his agreed-upon chores, and suddenly became a slob. It was like he's been intentionally dirtying things up. I stopped doing all of my housework out of protest a month into our marriage, and I now live in complete and utter filth. I'm rarely home due to the mess. I part-time live with my sister at this point, and he doesn't even care. I come home only to sleep at night, and sometimes I don't even come home at all. It's like we aren't even married anymore, and it's draining my mental health to the point where I've had multiple breakdowns this month. I'm completely over it. I wanted to get married, but this is not the man I married. I would much rather be home where I belong, but I'm not a maid. The mess is as follows. Wet food in the sink from him throwing his plate, finished or not, in there. Bugs, garbage littered everywhere, puddles of mystery substances. The trash is never taken out, all of his laundry is dirty. Clothes unfolded, crumbs galore, takeout everywhere since he won't cook, dishes piled to the skies. I can guarantee you there's more, but I can't describe it right. It's like he's a toddler. It's exactly like Mommy isn't cleaning up, so he's tornadoing through our house and not caring. Before, he would scrape his plate, rinse it, then leave it. He would take the trash outside and take the cans to the curb. He'd sweep, vacuum, occasionally do laundry, and he would never eat in the bed. Now he does it all. A few hours ago, I told him that if he doesn't clean up tonight, then I'm divorcing him tomorrow. I said if I don't see some progress on the house, then we're over. He told me that I'm being a jerk for no reason and that cleaning is no longer his job. I nearly popped a freaking blood vessel. We did not decide on that. He's telling me that I'm throwing everything away over pride and that all new marriages go through this transition. Bull freaking shoot, he told his mom, and she called me not too long ago and told me that I need to calm down and reconcile. I really love my mother-in-law, and she's one of the most level-headed people I know, hence the reason I'm writing this post. She's making me wonder if divorce is too far because it's only a mess, but it's a mess. She told me that we can reach a compromise, need to take a breather, and talk about it all, but I truthfully do not want to. She reminded me of our good times and that life won't always be the way it is now, but I'm feeling incredibly skeptical. I cannot stand filth, and I can't live like this even if it's for him. Am I the jerk? To add, after writing a long comment, I'm done. I know I just posted, but I truly am done. My mother-in-law made me second-guess myself, but all I needed was to think about it all and hear an outside opinion, even if it's just one. He fooled me for 4 years, and marriage is not trapping me. He used to clean up after himself and be the most wonderful partner. It's a real shame that he showed his true colors after we paid so much on our wedding. I'm not a maid, and he's not a toddler. Even toddlers are more responsible and respectful than him. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot, I've been there, same scenario. Once we got engaged and moved in together, my ex let the house get disgusting because he felt it was not his job to clean. Later, after I left him, but before I cut contact, he told me that his father told him to stand his ground and wait me out, and that eventually I'd crack and clean up and that he needed to ignore me and refuse to do anything I asked him to do, so that I'd learn my place. Any man who suddenly expects rigid gender roles as soon as they are married/committed is a raging misogynist and is absolutely just looking for a bangmaid. You deserve better, don't let him change your mind, and don't believe him if he tells you he'll change. He has just showed you who he is. Comment 2, not the idiot. My husband isn't even as bad as yours, and I am planning divorce after 9 years. I am disabled and decided to take back my messy house, and so I have been cleaning it all by myself, to the point where my muscles and joints get so bad I can barely walk. I take Epsom salt baths twice a day to combat it, and I still take care of our 3 kids. Not once did he see me limping around deep cleaning and get up out of his gaming chair and help. It will not get better, run. Now for the update. Thanks for reading my last post. After I told my husband I was done if he didn't clean up, things took a turn I didn't expect. He didn't clean, and I filed for divorce the next day. I thought that would be the end of it, but it was just the beginning of a whole new set of problems. First, I moved in with my sister full-time. It was supposed to be temporary, but weeks turned into months. My sister has been supportive, but it's been tough on both of us. Her apartment is small, and having me there has cramped her style. She's been patient, but I can tell she's getting frustrated. I can't blame her. I feel like a burden. Meanwhile, my husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband, has been making things difficult. He refused to move out of our house, claiming he has nowhere else to go. I didn't want to fight over the house, so I let him stay. Big mistake. He stopped paying the mortgage, and now we're facing foreclosure. I tried to talk to him about it, but he just shrugged it off, saying it wasn't his problem anymore. I had to dip into my savings to cover the payments, but it's not sustainable. Then there was the issue of our joint bank account. I thought we had an understanding that we wouldn't touch the money until the divorce was finalized. But one day, I checked the account and it was nearly empty. He had withdrawn most of the money. When I confronted him, he said he needed it for living expenses. I was furious, but didn't have the energy to fight him on it. I opened a new account in my name and transferred what little was left. The stress has been affecting my job performance. My boss called me into his office last week to discuss my recent decline in productivity. I tried to explain what was going on, but he wasn't sympathetic. He said I needed to get my act together or face consequences. I can't afford to lose my job, so I've been trying to focus, but it's hard when my personal life is in shambles. My mental health has taken a nosedive. I've been seeing a therapist, but progress is slow. I feel like I'm constantly on the verge of a breakdown. My therapist suggested medication, but I'm hesitant. I don't want to rely on pills to get through the day. But the anxiety and depression are overwhelming. Some days I can't even get out of bed. One night, I made the mistake of calling my husband after a few too many drinks. I don't remember much of the conversation, but I do remember crying and begging him to come back. The next day, I felt humiliated. I swore I wouldn't contact him again, but the damage was done. He started texting me, saying he missed me and wanted to work things out. I was tempted, but I knew it was just another manipulation tactic. My mother-in-law has been trying to mediate, but it's only made things worse. She means well, but her constant reminders of the good times are like salt in the wound. She keeps telling me that marriage is hard work and that we can get through this, but I don't see how. The trust is gone, and I can't live in filth and chaos. Then there was the incident with the car. We only have one, and it's in both our names. I needed it to get to work, but he kept taking it without telling me. One morning, I woke up to find it gone. I was late for work and had to take an expensive Uber ride. When I finally got a hold of him, he said he needed it for a job interview. I didn't believe him, but what could I do? I ended up buying a cheap used car, but it's unreliable and has already broken down twice. The final straw came when I found out he had been seeing someone else. A mutual friend let it slip that he had been dating a coworker. I felt like a fool. All this time, I had been agonizing over our marriage, and he had already moved on. It was a gut punch, but it also gave me the clarity I needed. I knew I had to cut ties completely. I hired a lawyer to expedite the divorce. It's costing me more than I can afford, but I need this to be over. The lawyer has been helpful, but the process is slow. My husband is dragging his feet, probably hoping I'll give up and come back. But I won't. I can't. Looking back, I realize I made a lot of mistakes. I should have seen the red flags earlier. I should have been more assertive, but hindsight is 20/20ths. Now I'm just trying to pick up the pieces and move forward. It's not easy, and some days I feel like I'm drowning. But I have to believe that things will get better. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for confronting my daughter's 44-year-old boyfriend and telling her to choose between us? My 48-year-old husband, 46-year-old, and I have a 20-year-old daughter, Ellie, who is currently on vacation from college. About 5 months or so ago, Ellie told us that she had a new boyfriend, who I'll call Tom. This came rather out of the blue, as Ellie hadn't mentioned seeing anyone or that she was dating, but both my husband and I were supportive and happy for her. However, Ellie was strangely secretive about the whole situation. Usually, she's an open book, especially with me, and would always share details of her personal life. On this occasion, she wouldn't show any pictures, and we knew next to no information about Tom, other than that they met at a party through a mutual friend. Ellie spent the past month of her vacation in her college town, and the plan was always for her to come back this weekend. Ellie asked if she could bring Tom with her for a few days of the trip as they were getting serious, and she wanted him to meet us. Although we mentioned that we knew barely anything about him, Ellie expressed that it would be a surprise and that we'd love him. Given he's clearly an important part of our daughter's life, we agreed and said we'd look forward to spending the weekend together. Yesterday morning, we went to pick up Ellie and Tom from the airport to drive them to our place, and we were shocked. We knew instantly that Tom was much older than Ellie, and he certainly wasn't a college student. I was just in a state of surprise but didn't want to cause a scene, and told my husband to do the same. We drove home, but it was a frosty journey, which Ellie commented on. When we arrived, my husband point-blank asked Tom how old he was. Tom said he was 44. I was immediately disgusted. He's only 2 years younger than my husband and old enough to be Ellie's father. My husband continued to interrogate him, asking how they met and the whole background. Ellie explained that it was at a party and Tom was there because he's well known around the town, and they realized they had a lot in common and hit it off from there. I really didn't want to hear any more, and my husband told Tom to leave. Ellie shouted and said how unfair this was, and we hadn't even given Tom a chance and that he made her happy. Tom could sense the tension so left, and Ellie followed behind him. I texted Ellie to tell her we'd love to see her and to come over to discuss the situation. She asked if Tom was welcome, and I said he wasn't. Therefore, after labeling me a judgmental jerk, she told me she wasn't coming and that they would be staying at a local hotel and catching up with friends. I feel terrible about the whole situation and don't want to lose my daughter over it. My husband isn't budging and says he'd have to be held back if he ever saw that man again. Am I the jerk for saying he isn't welcome, or have I done the right thing? To add, thank you to everyone for your comments. I have posted an update here. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Play the long game here. Best story I have heard, the dad befriended the guy. They talked about stuff relevant to their age group, did dad-age stuff together, talked about things like insurance and retirement and house payments, went out to eat at boring grown-up places instead of sports bars, and just generally acted like middle-aged men. She realized she was basically dating her father. They had almost nothing in common, and broke up. Comment 2. Not the idiot former cop. Advocate. I would suggest you don't give her a reason to distance herself further from you and your husband, because Tom needs to stop your support and brainwash her to think you are against her and you're not. I encourage you to not exclude him. You can get together somewhere public so he's not in your home, but you aren't letting him keep your daughter away while you navigate this precarious situation. All the best. Now for the update, thank you for reading. After the initial blow-up, things have been tense. Ellie stayed at the hotel with Tom for a few days, and we barely heard from her. My husband and I were at odds. He was adamant that Tom was bad news, while I was torn between my protective instincts and the fear of pushing Ellie away. We decided to give Ellie some space, hoping she'd come around on her own. A week later, Ellie called me. She was still upset, but agreed to meet for coffee without Tom. When we met, she looked tired and stressed. She told me she felt like we were treating her like a child and that she was capable of making her own decisions. I tried to explain our concerns about Tom's age and intentions, but she was defensive. She insisted that Tom made her happy and that she was serious about him. I could see she was determined, so I suggested we all sit down and talk things through calmly. She reluctantly agreed. We arranged a dinner at our house and Tom came over. My husband was civil but distant. We tried to keep the conversation light, but it was clear there was an elephant in the room. Eventually, Tom addressed it. He admitted that their age difference was significant, but claimed they had a genuine connection. He talked about his past relationships and how he had never felt this way before. Ellie looked at him with such admiration that it was hard not to see her side of things. Despite his words, my husband remained skeptical. He asked Tom about his job and future plans. Tom revealed he was a successful entrepreneur, which explained his presence at various social events. He assured us he had no ill intentions and wanted to support Ellie in her studies and future career. My husband wasn't convinced, but I could see Ellie was relieved that Tom was making an effort. Over the next few weeks, Ellie and Tom spent more time together, and she seemed genuinely happy. She even started talking about moving in with him after the semester ended. This worried us, but we didn't want to push her further away. We decided to keep a close eye on the situation and hoped Ellie would see any red flags on her own. Then, about 3 weeks ago, Ellie called me in tears. She and Tom had a huge fight. She was at a friend's place and didn't know what to do. I rushed over to see her. She was a mess, and it broke my heart. She told me Tom had been acting controlling and jealous, questioning her about her friends and her whereabouts. She felt suffocated and didn't know if she could handle it anymore. I hugged her and told her she could always come home. Ellie stayed with us for a few days to clear her head. During that time, Tom kept calling and texting, apologizing and begging her to come back. Ellie was torn. She loved him, but couldn't ignore how he made her feel. My husband and I tried to be supportive without pushing her in any direction. We wanted her to make the decision on her own. Eventually, Ellie decided to give Tom another chance. She said she needed to see if they could work things out. We were worried but respected her choice. She moved back in with Tom, and for a while things seemed to improve. They went on trips, and Ellie seemed happier. She even started talking about their future together again. But then, last week, things took a turn for the worse. Ellie called me late at night, crying and asking if she could come home. Tom had accused her of cheating and had gone through her phone. She felt violated and scared. My husband and I immediately went to pick her up. When we arrived, Tom was there, trying to apologize and make amends. My husband lost his temper and told Tom to stay away from Ellie. Ellie moved back home, and this time she seemed more resolute. She blocked Tom's number and cut off contact. She was heartbroken, but knew she couldn't stay in a relationship that made her feel trapped. My husband and I were relieved, but also worried about the emotional toll this had taken on her. In the days that followed, Ellie opened up about her relationship with Tom. She admitted that there were red flags from the beginning, but she ignored them because she was infatuated. She felt embarrassed and ashamed for not seeing it sooner. We reassured her that it wasn't her fault and that she deserved someone who treated her with respect. As Ellie started to heal, she focused on her studies and spent more time with friends. She seemed to be finding herself again, but the experience had left a mark. She was more cautious and guarded, and it was clear she had lost some of her youthful innocence. Looking back, I realized that Ellie's relationship with Tom had been a wake-up call for all of us. It made us see how vulnerable she was, and how important it was to support her without smothering her. We learned to trust her judgment while also being there to catch her when she fell. Thank you for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day!